Good afternoon, gallery, staff and councillors, and welcome to Richmond Valley Council's July Ordinary Meeting. I'll open the meeting with acknowledgement of country. Richmond Valley Council recognises the people of the Bundjalung Nations as custodians and traditional owners of this land, and we value and appreciate the continuing culture, connections to lands, their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region in the past, present and future. Ms Acting General Manager, could you read the prayer, please?
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our Richmond Valley community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future and the rights and needs of both individuals and the community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations, and in our efforts here today, may we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen. Brings us to item 3, public access and question time. We have 3 speakers today, and the first one is Dr. Richard Gates, and he will be addressing Council in relation to item 15.1, Code of Meeting Practice. Welcome, Dr. Gates, and when you're ready, start, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I'm addressing you today as a private citizen and ratepayer about some of the proposed changes to the Code of Meeting Practice, which, in my view, are an affront to the democratic process. While some of the changes relate to video conferencing, and they're fine, there are other parts which worry me a great deal, particularly those relating to public access and secret meetings of council. This document with proposed changes is perhaps the most important issue to come to council in the last 22 years, since RVC was formed against the will of the people when residents and ratepayers were denied their democratic right to go to the polls by our then local member and Minister for Local Government, Harry Woods. Woods subsequently lost his seat as a result. The then Richmond Rivershire Council met behind closed doors out of the public view at the Evans Head Bowling Club, where it resolved to pursue amalgamation, a process the Ombudsman agreed was in breach of the Reformed Local Government Act, where transparency and accountability were to be the pillars of the way in which we were to be governed. Sadly, the Ombudsman only let the public know its findings after the forced amalgamation was complete some 2 years later. So much for the guardians of the public interest. The democratic process during the amalgamation procedure was well and truly rorted by the governments of the day. All the promised benefits never came to pass, and the newly formed council is still enjoying the expensive legacy of that shotgun marriage, including the very costly Iron Gates development, which should have been brought to heel years ago. In passing, I note the conclusions of the independent town planning expert's opinion commissioned by council rejecting the Iron Gates proposal and sent to the NRPP. I hope that council supports that finding. The reason I've raised these wider matters is that they reflect poorly on the keepers of the democratic process. That is, our elected representatives and the bureaucrats hired to mind the democratic shop and put in place the will of the people. I do not want to see that happening again, but in the proposed Code of Meeting Practice, I see that possibility re-emerging through some of the onerous rules proposed for public access and secret meetings of council out of the public view before the public meeting of council. You already hold secret meetings, also known as information sessions, where no public minutes are kept and made available for public for scrutiny, and to which the public is not invited. Why an additional meeting out of the public view? It begs the question, why all the secrecy, and how can we hold council to account in these circumstances? Why shouldn't we hear the briefing provided to councillors? Such secrecy only promotes distrust and suspicion. Some of you will remember the council meeting held at Evans Head when council met out of the public view about coal seam gas before the regular council meeting. This did not engender public trust and became a major impetus for opposition to CSG. Councillors, there was no public discussion or debate about the proposed changes for the new meeting rules when the proposed code, including supplementary paragraphs not contained in the model code, were put to you in May, and the public did not respond with comments about the proposed changes, as it has been busy dealing with various disasters and may not have read or understood the importance of the proposed changes. You provide the lead to disinterest by not raising the matter for public discussion at the May meeting, although I can quite understand that you might have other practical things on your mind, such as helping folks affected by the flood. But in my view, it is still a matter which should have been raised in public for debate. If you think not, then we have different views about what constitutes the democratic process, and it's important to good decision making. Yes, it is messy and comes with difficult baggage from time to time, but debate is critical in making sure we get it right. So what does all this need to make public access so restricted and difficult for constituents? I wrote to Council seeking an explanation about some matters and was not provided with an explanation. Instead, I was told to put my concerns in writing. Quote, "You are welcome to make a submission highlighting any matters you believe require clarification or improvement. Submissions can be made via the following methods," etc. This is not a dialogue or useful process in trying to understand why onerous rules were proposed and how I should address the proposed changes. Where did they come from? Who proposed them and why? What criteria will the General Manager be using with his newfound discretionary powers to approve or reject a request from the public to address Council? We have no idea. Who decided that matters for determination will be the only matters we can raise at public access except with permission of the General Manager for other matters? What criteria will he use in his decision-making? We have no idea, and so on. The potential for interference in what is one of the few mechanisms the public has available in the public domain for voicing their concern will be subject, just finish if I may, to the unspecified discretion of a General Manager with no mechanisms for accountability for the decision. This, in my view, is bureaucratic overreach into the political process and, in effect, a mechanism for gagging public debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Has any councillors got any questions? Dr. Gates? Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, I guess my question is, like, I certainly hear your concerns and understand them. When you were given, or the suggestion was made to make that submission, because we've now got council with a code of meeting practice with no submissions, with nobody raising concerns through that process. Was there a reason you chose not to follow that particular process?
Yes, there was. The amount of time taken in that circumstance, given the response I've had from Council, which was no explanation at all, I wondered whether it was actually worthwhile investing my time in that. Instead, what I've done is to actually refer this matter elsewhere for political and legal advice, because I actually believe it's a breach of various codes and should be reined in. So that's part of the reason I didn't respond. There was already correspondence that I'd had with the council officer at the time, so that's there on the record. And I thought I would wait for this opportunity for public access to raise these matters so that there could be an opportunity for some debate. I'm also very busy, like you are, in these circumstances, and I had a number of other things come up at the time which actually precluded me from spending the time I would like to have done on this matter at the time.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Gates, and I
Thank
can
you.
assure you when the item will be a call later that some of your concerns will be responded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, you're welcome.
Our next speaker is Ms. Lyndall Murray, and Ms. Murray will be addressing Council in relation to item 19.7, Iron Gates Development Update. Would you like to come forward, please, Lyndall? welcome, and on the four-minute time, the bell will be rung. That will give you notice that you've got a minute to go, but if you go over a little bit, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Just start when you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Today I represent a small cohort of people who are here in the gallery. We together represent about 600 active campaigners that stand before you to provide you with certainty that the community categorically do not support the Iron Gates development. I'm not here today to talk about policies, legislation, or the full gamut of technicalities that have been identified by the New South Wales architect or the recent report delivered by the council's own independently appointed town planner as to why Iron Gates shouldn't go ahead. These reports by the experts both indicate, in my view, an uninspiring proposal for development on land that has not taken into consideration the environment, cultural significance, or social impact. I am here today to talk on behalf of the next generation, the cohort of young people in this room who recently voted in their first election, many of whom were not old enough to vote at the preceding council elections. Our region was hit by 2 in 100-year floods in 4 weeks. Iron Gates Road was completely underwater. I ran a 000 call centre through my social media for 12 days before handing my operation over to the EOC in March. I was a part of a team of community members who raised over $500,000, had 17 civilian-funded helicopters in the air and over 45 boats, completing search and rescue operations that saved lives when our emergency services failed us. We facilitated over 500 missions in the first 7 days compared to the armed forces' documented 70. If we consider as a community to add another 200 houses to a satellite suburb, requiring emergency response in the next disaster, put simply, people will die. It will not only be a risk to the lives of the people who own houses or live in the developed estate, but it will be the people's lives that go in to save them that will be at risk too, whether it be at floods or fires. We are in a housing crisis. No one understands this better than me. I am lucky enough to own a house that became a refuge for flood victims. My house is full of people who cannot afford houses or accommodation in Evans Head. And for 2 months, that included a caravan with 2 young people and 2 dogs camped out on my front lawn. These people stand with me and ask for long-term sustainable housing solutions that don't decimate the environment. When the director of Gold Coral at the Evans Head Business Chamber meeting in 2019, which I was in attendance at, was asked about affordable housing for our community's most vulnerable, he said, and I quote, "That is a government issue." He indicated no intention to create affordable housing solutions for generational families who are being displaced from their community and support networks because of the rise of cost of living. This development is not for the benefit of many, but the benefit of a few. This development is not for the benefit of many, but for the greed of a few. I end by reading a transcript presented to you with permission today from 3rd-generation residents: Olivia, 8 years old, Delilah, 6 years old, and Harry, 4 years old. This family is directly affected by the housing crisis in Evans Head. They are a family of 4, mum and 3 kids, who currently reside at Grandma's house because they can't find affordable housing in Evans Head. This is what the next generation have to say. When Mum asked, "What do you think about Iron Gates?" Olivia, 8, says, "I think it's incredibly sad." Delilah, 6, "Me too." Mum then asks, "Why is that?" Delilah says, "Because they're just destroying all of the land that the animals need to keep living. The koalas that are there would lose their homes." Olivia, "And the Jennas and everything else. And the land is very special to the Bangjalang people." Harry, 4, "It's Bangjalang country, Livy, not just land. This is Bangjalang country." Olivia, "Yes, Harry, and the old people that have been there forever and ever. What are they called?" Mum says, "Ancestors." Olivia, "Yep, ancestors. Well, this has all of their memories and love in their sacred sites, and when people are just being greedy and only thinking about making money and building houses, they are actually destroying the habitat of everything, and you can't ever get that back." Delilah says, "That's right. And people need to remember that cutting down trees, not thinking of other people, means that when I have my babies, they might not get to see the things that I see. And I think that's really sad." Harry says, me too. Me love them, Jen and Jenna's mum. Delilah says, because once things are built, you can't get it back. Like the big roads and the big houses and everything that has been broken down for them to be built. Even when we plant more trees, it doesn't always mean that the animals are okay. Mum then says, is there anything else you kiddies want to say? Olivia says, no, Mum, I just hope people are kind and not greedy. Delilah, I really, really hope they don't knock the trees down, Mum. Together we have a responsibility to the next generation. My question is on behalf of them. Will you be supporting the independent town planners report that it has rejected the DA at the upcoming NRPP meeting? As a community, we deserve better. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Would you take questions if
Yes,
there are any?
absolutely.
Has any councillor got any questions? No, it looks like you've done a very good job. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Our third speaker tonight is Ms Elaine Saunders, and Elaine will be addressing council in relation to the item 19.7 Iron Gates Development Update also. Welcome, Elaine. By now, I'm sure you would understand that the bells ring at 4 and then 5. Okay, so when you're ready, welcome. And
Thank you. Good evening, councillors, mayor and council officials. I have a lot of criticisms of this DA, but that's not what I'm going to discuss tonight because that's in my submissions. For me, this is not about getting a better DA. I don't want to see this DA withdrawn only to find I'm fighting another DA for this same site down the track. I feel very strongly that this site is not suitable for development and that Richmond Valley Council should rezone the site. I've lived on the south side of Evans Head within the township for 20 years. I was evacuated in 2019 during the extreme bushfire event and told that the Rural Fire Service couldn't guarantee to protect my home. People died in Richmond Valley Council area during that fire. We could sit with that for a moment. I was lucky that the wind changed and then it rained and I was safe. Some weren't so lucky. I would suggest that the Iron Gate site, if development is allowed, is a bushfire nightmare in the making. There's one access road in and out. In 2022, the south side of Evans Head was cut off from the rest of the town for several days by catastrophic floods. There's no shops there. We supported each other, but these are stressful events even if you don't lose your home. I helped later sorting donations at the airfield, and I heard heartbreaking stories again and again. People telling me that they'd been informed through Richmond Valley Council processes that the house they purchased was on land that didn't flood. People who thought they'd be safe on upper floors. Landslips on higher ground, sinkholes and houses destabilised. We do not need more people at risk, more people traumatised. The Iron Gate site should not be built on. It floods. The access road floods. It will put people at risk. Will there be enough volunteers to do the rescues next time? Those blokes in tinnies were heroes, but if this development goes ahead, around 500 more people will be at risk of needing rescue. Any persons or groups that approve development on flood-prone land could find themselves at serious risk of litigation for negligence by potential victims of future flooding events because they knew, or they ought to have known, that they were putting lives and property at risk by approving such a development, not to mention insurance issues for flood-prone land. I also want to look at the 2021 case in the Land and Environment Court, White versus Ballina. This case concerned an illegal road where illegal clearing had taken place in Ballina Shire. The court found that environmental assessment for that development had to go back to the site as it existed prior to the illegal clearing. And I suspect this was to prevent people benefiting from illegal works. It also put a much higher value on regrowth as habitat for wildlife. Now, regrowth in the Iron Gates DA is dismissed as having no value. Ballina Council had to go to a great deal of trouble to find enough historical material to back their case. However, there is ample film footage which shows the illegal clearing on the Iron Gate site and road. Indeed, film shows harrowing shots of koalas falling from trees as they are being illegally felled. White versus Ballina has implications for any development on the Iron Gate site and drive. It creates a new precedent. Now, this is an old DA. My first submission against this DA was in November 2014, and I have made a further 4 lengthy submissions against this DA, which remains in 2022 substantially the same it was in 2014. We've had in the real world, much has changed in that time. You couldn't get away today with attitudes to women that were tolerated in 2014, that's for sure. We've had catastrophic bushfires and floods. The eyes that were on the DA in 2014 should be viewing it in a very different way now, taking into account the more extreme weather events and fire risks that are likely with climate change. May I finish?
Yes, yes.
There are court precedents and legislation that demand this. The environmental assessment done by the proponent was poorly done then in 2014. In 2022, it's totally inadequate. Malcolm Scott's report, commissioned by Richmond Valley Council and forwarded to the NRPP, is an excellent examination of the current DA before Richmond Valley Council, and I recommend that all councillors support this report. He is scathing of the quality of the DA materials. I have read the lengthy report, but anyone can easily read the last 15 pages which contain the summary of his findings, and I recommend it to you all. Thank you.
You take questions if there's any?
Yes, yes.
Any council got any questions? No questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I again thank all the speakers on their presentations tonight, and I wish them all a safe trip home. That brings us to item 4, apologies. I have one apology from our General Manager, Mr Vaughan McDonald. Could I get a move of that, please?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Morrissey, second. Councillor Cornish, put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. There is no mayoral minute. Confirmation of the minutes 6.1 of the ordinary meeting held on the 28th of June. Could I get a move of those confirmations?
I'll move.
Accuracy?
Second.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Morrissey. All councillors in agreement for that accuracy? Put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Matters arising out of that meeting? No matters arising. Declarations of interest. I have a declaration myself. It's for item 14.1. It's a pecuniary, and I am an owner of properties within the local government area that have been impacted by flood damage. I'll hand that to the Acting General Manager. Any other declarations?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I have another declaration of interest for the same item, item 14.1. It's from Director Ryan Gator, and it's pecuniary interest, given he owns a flood-impacted property in the Richmond Valley.
Thank you. Item 9, petitions, there's nil, and notice of motions, there's nil. Page 8, we have item 11.1, mayoral attendances. I'll move those.
Second,
Could I get a seconder, please? Councillor Morrissey. Any questions on those attendances? Councillor Deegan?
Yeah, just interested in the Northern Rivers Resilience Initiative meeting and also the meeting with the Health Board, Health District Board Chair.
Did you have a question or you just wanted...
Oh, just some information.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first one was a Northern Rivers Resilience Initiative meeting. That was online. It was just an update. There's been a lot of further information come to light. It was just coming into when the mainly about grants and where they were going with those. Since then, the corporation has taken over. So I think everyone's still waiting for that inquiry, the independent inquiry, to come out. What comes out of that, then there'll be a lot of action taken after that. The hospital board meeting, actually the board met in Casino, so I think it's just the polite, they asked the local mayor to go. Our acting general manager accompanied on that. Out of that, they gave the undertaking that Casino Hospital would be here forever and a day. They did touch a bit on the two Korokai and I can't think of the words. Health ones. They touched on those, and they're getting supported well in that community down there. But other than that, it was just, I think, more of a meet and greet and make contact with council.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? No questions, sorry? No, I'll put that motion then. Carried. Delegates' reports is nil. Matters for determination without debate. Has any councillor got any items they'd like to call?
Yeah, 14.1.
15.1? 16.1, sorry. Any other?
Oh, 15.1.
15.1?
Yeah.
No others? That leaves us with 15.2. I need a motion for 15.2.
Move that way.
Second.
Second,
Second.
Councillor Cornish. I'll put that motion in. All those in favour, 15.2. Our first item then is 14.1. Councillor Hayes.
I just,
Sorry? Oh, yeah. I'm out of here. Councillor, Deputy Mayor Morrissey.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Item 14.1, Councillor Hayes.
yeah, I'd like to ask a question and then maybe change the recommendation after I get the answer to the question. Okay, so look, I asked for that report to come to council through a notice of motion, going back a little bit. And thanks for the report. It's very informative and it covered everything that we could possibly cover. On page 12, I think, page 13, it says in there, however, the second paragraph down if you want to read along, it says, however, Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation Chief Executive David Witherden has recently announced that the corporation will be looking at the data, principles and strategic design for a housing program that may include buyback, house raising, resilient rebuilding and the potential for land swaps as a priority option. If the recommendation doesn't carry through and say, it says that we continue to advocate for New South Wales Government to support voluntary house raising. It doesn't mention the other items, and if I can get a seconder, I'd like to change dot point 2 to read that continues to advocate for New South Wales Government support for housing program that may include buyback, house raising, resilient rebuilding and the potential for land swaps as a priority action. If I can get a seconder, that's what I'd like to move.
Could I ask a question as well? Because I'm interested in seconding it. I was also, why I asked through the chair, Councillor Hayes, because I was interested, there's another part there and it was talking about calling for a report back to council also on the assistance program for demolition and rebuilding. So if we could have another point to include that in the...
Be happy with that? Yep.
So councillor Humphries, you will second?
My point number 4 would be, there's towards the end of the report, it talks about a further report back to council on funding and assistance program for demolition rebuild housing. Three.
What
Number
page
3.
was that? Sorry, councillor Humphries.
Yes, I'll find it. It is towards the end, towards the end, the one above the conclusion.
Page?
Page 13, and it reads, second line, go to the options to assist rebuilding work.
Yep.
Go down to the second paragraph, come in after consent, it says, then it may be appropriate to provide an assistance program for properties that require demolition and rebuild. And it goes on with some examples in the report saying how it's quite complex and how we go about doing that. Is that acceptable?
Director Jones, sorry.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Certainly can add those in, both Councillor Humphries and Councillor Hayes. There's no issues there, so we can amend that resolution to include both those items. Yep. Councillor Hayes, can you just confirm the wording of point 2?
Just,
Okay, it says,
so
yep,
Slowly.
can print it out, write it out, whatever.
okay, so continues to advocate for New South Wales Government support for housing program that may include buyback, house raising, resilient building, and the potential for land swaps as a priority action. That's it,
That's it. And councillor Humphries, your
number 3.
point 3?
Number 3, that council bring back a report on funding options in line perhaps with those provided for the 2019 bushfire assistance.
Is that right, councillor Humphries?
Council bring back report funding options in line with the proposed. Yes, thank you.
And councillor Hayes, being the mover, happy with that there?
Yep, that's fine.
Councillor Humphries, that second?
So I'll second that, thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to speak to it, Mr. Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, look, I think it's important that we cover all bases with these things, that if we just say that we want house raising, and then there's other items in there that that may be overlooked in the future, we just need to be able to go back and say, well, look, we have asked that these things all come back to us at some point in time. And look, I assume as this corporation forms and builds, we'll get more reports on what they're doing and, you know, what fee relief and whatever. I assume that if we get things like house raising and you know, maybe buybacks and rebuilding and stuff, that we'll also get relief on fees that development fees associated with those items at that time, rather than going through the council process.
Did you?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, we will endeavour to bring you back information as it comes to light, particularly with regards to the corporation as they progress. I was on a call with the general managers and David Witherden the other day, and certainly those items that we've mentioned and included in dot point 2 are on the agenda, and they're hoping to have some clarity around what they may or may not do within the coming months. Obviously, the scale of the disaster and the enormity of trying to figure out how best to assist the community and what help will be provided as far as either physical or financial assistance. There's a lot of work to be done there, so it could take several months, but we will endeavour to provide regular updates to Council with regards to the corporation and how they are tracking.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Yes, thanks.
Councillor Humphries?
I'd just like to speak in support of Councillor Hayes's the recommendation. I really think it's important not to be duplicating any of the work that's being carried out, so I support waiting for the New South Wales Government correspondence and then also the corporation's information back about whether they are going to take up that. I believe that if they do, it mightn't be such a financial burden to Council for us to wait. And I also think that they've got to hit the ground running, and if they get on board with this, they'll hit the ground running and they'll roll it out more like in a seamless fashion, like let's hope. Going with the bushfire, I'm talking about the bushfires. In the report here, it talks about how successful the funding was for the bushfires and how the DAs come together and they were rolled out in a 5-day turnaround. It also says that it will be a lot more complex for the homes that have been devastated by the floods, but I can see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If we find out where the funding is, if you look at the figures, we're looking at a lesser number of homes impacted than what we thought they were going to be. And for the bushfires, we had a budget of $46,000. We're asked here, we're looking at, say, for example, 15 properties at the $4,822. We're looking at $72,330. So I truly believe that if we get that report back, we have a look a bit deeper down into the complexities of how the flood has impacted the homes. Look at those, be realistic about what we're going to be telling our community and find that money. I think that's really important to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Deegan.
Yes, I'd certainly support the motion and agree with Councillor Humphrey's comments that we do need to look at options to provide support to people through the rebuild process in terms of the flood impact, and to look at what options are available. If we did go down the fee relief path, would we likely get support from the state government to help cover some of those costs, or would the money directly have to come from the other parts of the council budget?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. With the bushfire, we actually found that money ourselves in our general fund. It wasn't a large amount of money then, and we did find it. Depending on the scale of this, the cost could be significant. So obviously we would like the state government to provide the financial assistance for that and cover it, so council wouldn't have to find it. So this is what the corporation hopefully will come up with, some solutions and some clarity on how they're going to proceed in the future. So ultimately, yes, we'd love the state government to fund it, but if they don't, then it would be up to council to find that money in either budget savings, cutting programs or services. So that's the decision that would have to be made if it's not going to be funded by the state.
Thank you.
And I think that's a good approach, as suggested, to get as much information as we can, because certainly I think we all want to be able to support people through the recovery process as much as possible.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Hayes?
Just to close, look, that report is a great report to have in our business paper, and you can refer back to it with, that we've discussed all these items and we've put in place something that in the future could help the flood damaged properties in our region, so in our council area. So yeah, it's a great report, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Somebody like to knock on the mayor's door, please? Come back.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morrissey. Councillors, we're now on page 14, 15.1. Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, so I'll move the motion.
Seconder, please.
Second.
Councillor Humphries, was it? Councillor Deegan.
Yes, so, was very interested in the presentation by Dr. Gates tonight, and certainly understand his concerns. So I do have a few questions, I guess, just to start with, just to clarify some information in relation to the process and the draft code, or the code of meeting practice. So I guess the process that's been followed and the contents and around issues like public access. So does the code of meeting practice, as it's been exhibited, meet all the legislative and legal requirements and the requirements of the New South Wales Office of Local Government? I guess would be the first question.
Do you want to take all the questions? Have you got a spool there, or do you want to address them one by one?
How about I get all the questions
Yeah,
and I'll see?
is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. And then if all the answers aren't there, you can just follow up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of the point, and I don't have the attachment in front of me, but around public access for matters of information, where the general manager is able to make a decision as to whether people can speak or not. Is there, under what criteria or conditions would an application to speak be approved or declined? And that might be a hard question to ask. And is there a process then people can go through if they don't agree with that decision? And there was also comments made by Dr. Gates, I guess, around additional confidential meetings. Now, my understanding was that the meetings that were mentioned in there are the information sessions that already occur. So just clarifying if that is correct, or if there are additional confidential meetings within that, because I just picked up that point from the presentation tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Acting General Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So I'll attempt to address those questions, Councillor Deegan. If I don't, let me know and I'll give it another go. So Section 4 of the Model Code of Meeting Practice relating to public forums is a non-mandatory section of the code. And it's a matter for each council to determine whether or not it will provide a public forum and how it will be managed. So the Model Code provides guidance on how it may occur. Richmond Valley Council has chosen to offer a public forum as part of the council meeting. So in that regard, the full provisions of the code does apply. Matters for information do not require a decision of council. And as the name suggests, there are matters there for information for council and the community, and there's no resolution actually required. The public is welcome any time to make submissions to council on these matters, either by contacting the elected representatives or writing directly to council. So at this point in time, the draft Code of Meeting Practice does state that the items in the agenda that are for determination are those that public access can be taken on, and it's a matter of the General Manager to determine whether or not we accept public access with regards to the information. So at this point in time, I'm not aware of any sort of conditions about when or when not the matters for information will be accepted by the General Manager, and I think that's probably something for him to answer when he's back, and not myself at this point in time, so we might take that one on notice. And with regards to your last question, can you just refresh my memory?
Yeah, so in the presentation tonight, it did mention and please forgive me, Dr. Gates, if I'm misquoting or stating this wrong, additional secret meetings as part of the as part of the new code, whereas my understanding from my reading it was just talking to the information sessions that are already held in a confidential setting.
Yes, Councillor Deegan. So as we know, we have information sessions, which are an opportunity for council to discuss with staff various matters, not necessarily business paper matters. So yeah, and they aren't minuted. So I don't know whether you'd like to call them secret or not. I'm not aware of any other secret meetings that are regularly held by council. We have those two forums, the information session and the general business agenda, like we have this evening, the ordinary meetings.
But there's certainly no additional meetings included in the code. Yeah, and I guess these other two are just out of interest. So yeah, I just made a couple of notes when I was reading through it. So for public access, speakers required to live within the Richmond Valley, and is there an option for people who may not be able to get here to speak via audio-visual links and so forth? It's not mentioned in there, it was just a curiosity more than anything.
Through you, Miss Mayor, I'm not aware of our communications and whether that is possible or not.
Can we take that on notice
yep.
and let you know at the next meeting?
Yep. Cool. I think that's probably enough questions for now.
I had a question.
Councillor Hayes.
The 42 days that it was out for public submissions is quite a long time, and we actually got no submissions. Did we get any other phone inquiries that you're aware of, other than Mr. Gates?
Through you, Miss Mayor, not that I'm aware of, no.
Any other councillors? I'll just follow up on Councillor Hayes. As if a submission comes forward when we are out advertising, usually the concerns in those submissions are, and answers are put into this agenda. And if there had been a submission supplied, we would have had to have that included in the agenda, which does help us when we're doing the decision making, rather than just coming in and speaking 10 or 15 minutes before we have to make a decision on this. So I would encourage everyone in future to put in a submission. It helps councillors understand what the concerns are and ask some questions of staff beforehand. So it would be good. I also note that about matters for information with the General Manager, I think that's one reason it's there, is because if we get a lot of speakers wanting to speak on matters for determination, to me they have priority over someone who wants to speak about a matter for information that council just adopts in globo, because when we have to determine an item, I think that should have a higher priority than just someone speaking on that. I also, the General Manager, I think, has a lot to do, he needs to look at if there's any visual presentation, because there are precedent being set where there has been presentations given, not mainly at council, but things put on live streaming, where there has been court cases over it. So he has to be comfortable, because he is responsible for what comes out of this meeting. That's the General Manager's role. So he needs to look at that to make sure that everything complies with the Privacy Act, and you know, there could be slander or anything in those presentations. So he really needs to be comfortable that that comes out of this meeting and goes out into the wide world. So I think that that's a regulation that we have to support him on, because if he hasn't got that authority, anything can go out of this meeting and council could become liable, as well as the responsible site for anything that comes out of here. So I think that's a necessity. And I think that anyone with a would understand that it needs to be there. Otherwise, we see some of the stuff that's happening on the live social media, and you know, we can't allow that to happen out of here. Any other speakers? Councillor Deegan to close.
Sorry? I think we... have we-
Councillor Deegan moved it, second Councillor Humphries.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I guess just one other comment. If somebody did put in a request to speak and that was declined, they can always come back to councillors and we could make representations on their behalf if necessarily, not an attempt to overrule the General Manager certainly, but that is another part of the process that could be followed where we could make representations on their behalf as well. Yeah, certainly understand the concerns raised in the presentation tonight, but I find myself in a position, and I don't, councillors will make up their own mind, where we've got a code here that's now back at its second meeting. It went on exhibition, all the processes were followed, and we received no submissions. So while I understand the concerns, I do find that I will need to support the motion.
Thank you. That closes the debate. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 16.1 on page 20. Councillor Morrissey.
I'll move that, Mr Mayor, as is.
Second.
Second, oh no.
Who's? Councillor Cornish. Second. Councillor Morris.
Not to say too much, Mr Mayor, but once again, the responsible officer, Mr McAteer, has presented a well-done agenda here with plenty of information, and consultation was an important one for me on page 26, and for it to move forward by gateway determination to continue on.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, that land up round Reddens Lane's been, you know, it's very popular at the moment because it's flood-free. There's not many blocks up there for sale at the moment, so the rezoning land like this, I think, is great for that area. And it's been a long time coming. I know it's been on the council agenda for quite a while. Yeah. So it's good to see it's finally up there and it's getting dealt with. So great.
Councillor Humphries.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr Mayor. And as Councillor Hayes said, I'm looking at the constraints section on page 23. You can see there, the second one there talks about being, it considers the flood-prone land, and it's outside that. It's also talking about the prime cropping or pastoral land. The footprint was reduced so that wouldn't affect that. And it also then goes on to talk about down the bottom about the effluent disposal and how that will then be, they've got to talk more about that, but that'll be able to be done concurrently, so there's no hold up there with the application. It also goes on to talk about that might need to go at a few, might be monitored at the DA stage in particular because the RFS are looking at a second access. So I always find it important and interesting to read how else, you know, what makes the DA go further and what the applicant has to do to achieve, what he has to do to actually achieve it and get it to the next level. So thank you for that.
Any other speakers? I'll just follow up on Councillor Hayes' comment about it has been with council for a while, but when you look at the report, the amount of government agencies has been referred to, and that all takes time. The consultants, and there's studies there that just, you know, the RFS, you've got those, you've got the Department of Agriculture, Primary Industries and Agriculture. So it takes a long time to get to this stage, but hopefully it will have a pretty smooth pathway now, and they'll get approval and we can start getting some more building blocks in our community, which will hopefully take a bit of pressure off housing. Any other speakers? Councillor Morrissey to close.
No, everything's right, Mr Mayor, thank you.
I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Unanimous. Councillors, we now go to item 17, projects and business development nil, general business nil, and matters for information now on page 28. Could I get a mover, please?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Hayes. Councillor Humphries, could you turn your light off, please? Councillor Morrissey, do you have any items? No. Councillor Hayes. It's on page 54, councillors in the gallery. Councillor Hayes.
Am I able to go to the lectern to speak?
Sorry?
Can I go up there and speak so I can face the...
No.
Why not?
Oh, I don't never happened before. Councillors usually just
can
speak.
I? Can I?
I've never known
I
that.
just don't like speaking with my back to people, that's all.
All right. Can the video see you? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, I've never had that request before. You've got 5 minutes. The bell will ring at 4.
On. You go as long as I like. Look, tonight we've heard a couple of stories on the Iron Gates and they've been well received. I'd just like to note that Lyndall's story that followed on with the children's opinion on the the development and what's going on in town. I know those kids, and it was interesting. And I think there'll be a few people in here that know those children as well. I've got a story myself, and I'd like to read it out. I've waited a while. It's been a long time since the Iron Gates development was booted around in Evans. So I'll read off my paper so I don't make any mistakes. I've resided in Evans Head for more than 30 years. All the time, the Iron Gates development has been a topic for discussion. People's perceptions of my opinion on the proposed development have varied over this time, and since I've become a councillor, my opinion is always queried around election time. Firstly, I'm going to paint a picture for you, hopefully to let you know that the journey where we are reliving today is similar to what it was all those years ago. I've had over 30 years of knowledge of this development. When the first DA was approved, I had just relocated to Evans Head to raise my young family. Not a lot different to a lot of you that are here tonight. I had recently gained a full builder's licence. My assumptions at the time in my life was that the amount of building work that this would bring to the area would allow me to live and work in this wonderful part of the North Coast without having to travel for hours a day for work. It was never about the development, it was simply about the growth of Evans Head. This growth would allow me to produce an income to support my family, enjoy the Evans Head lifestyle. I've spent 30 years being home for lunch, have home from work at a reasonable hour, and to be able to utilise the river and the ocean, attend school functions and spend family time with my children while they were growing up in town. I employed many local apprentices, tradesmen and subcontractors who got to enjoy the same lifestyle. When the Iron Gates development stalled, and due to the lack of residential land developments, I was forced to find other ways of maintaining my lifestyle. I decided to buy development properties to keep myself and my employees working locally. I've purchased many sites around town where old dilapidated buildings stood, demolished them and built low-level houses and units, mainly for elderly people to purchase for their retirement, to fill a void left by the inability of the community to be able to establish an old age facility in Evans Head. To this day, these very small-scale developments still service the Evans Head community with housing for families and the elderly. My motto in business was always to run my building business to support and maintain my family's Evans Head lifestyle and the needs of my local employees, and to support the low-keyed progress of the Evans Head village. Although I've managed to keep in full-time work without the Iron Gates going ahead, I do wonder what Evans Head would be like today if the original DA went ahead in the early 1990s. I'm of the opinion that the slow release of residential subdivisions on land surrounding the airport has contributed to the position we are in today with affordable housing issues. My experience and memories from the original Iron Gates development in the early 90s are similar to what is happening today. Protests, petitions and lots of beefed up media stories which divide our community. When the first stages of the land release were nearly completed on site, open days were held, this is back in the original one, open days were held for prospective purchasers of the lots, okay, which I was one of. They were promoted to cater for a family atmosphere on the day. They had open days out there, they had barbecues, they had balloons for kids and all that kind of stuff, if anyone remembers. Okay, 2 items are still very clear in my mind and I'd like to share them with you tonight. One Saturday, I headed out to the site in our family car. My young daughter was in the car beside her brother in the rear seat. There was a roadblock that protesters had set up leading into the site, so we stopped in the line of cars and all of a sudden, out of the surrounding bush came protesters wielding sticks, mud balls and other items which they used to attack our cars and using their feet to ding our cars as we drove off. When we got to the car parking area, I walked from my car to the site office to talk to a sales consultant, carrying my daughter and my son walking beside me. I was blocked by a man and a woman. They mumbled a few words and before I could reply, they spat on the ground in front of me, and I know my 2 children remember these items to this day. The Iron Gates development since the original DA has become a very complex matter. The report in item 19.7 in today's business paper is a brief outline of where it is up to. Council have now assessed the current proposal against New South Wales planning regulations, inclusive of all the submissions received for and against the proposal, and have provided independent assessment to pass on to the Northern Rivers Joint Regional Planning Panel for their assessment and decision. During our election campaign in December 2021, we promised the Evans Head community that we would get this matter to a council meeting if we were in a position to do so, and this time has arrived. I have not changed what I said during the election campaign. The land is privately owned and is zoned appropriately. The proposal in its current form is not ideal to me. There has been a lot of chances to alter or change the proposal over the last 7 years, which has not taken place. The guaranteed health of our river system and the safety of the people that may live there is very important to me, as is the future growth of Evans Head. The wedge that this proposal and previous proposals have driven into our small community is not acceptable and does not fit into our close-knit village lifestyle. The new staged concept DA has placed a financial burden on council's ratepayers to carry out these assessments. I feel now that the proposal has been independently assessed, it may be achievable. But for me to personally support it, there would need to be changes made in line with the latest independent assessment report to further comply with current planning policies. If the above changes can be addressed as conditions of consent, I feel that it could be the type of development for Evans Head's ongoing growth into the future. However, I do not support it in its current format without adequate changes being made. I'm of the opinion that it is ready to proceed to the JRPP for further assessment and that the panel will consider the concerns of the community and the public meeting that they may, at any public meeting they may convene in the near future. We need this wedge removed from our community. I hope that in my time on council that this proposal does not come back to council for any further assessment, as all this does is place a financial and social impact on our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Is there any other speakers? Councillor Deegan.
I'll make a short comment. Yeah, basically just that obviously there is a need for more housing and more development in the Richmond Valley, and particularly to address housing affordability and availability. But one of the most important factors is that any development is sustainable, and just noting in the report that Council commissioned and it has gone to the Regional Planning Panel is that this proposal as it is not a good planning outcome in regard to environmental sensitivity of the land and the location. So just noting those comments in the report.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Humphries.
Mr Mayor, I think the last paragraph is important. It talks about, well, there's 2 points. Council does not determine the outcome, but it also says that it's likely, and I believe it's happened 99% of the time that the panel will conduct a hearing public meeting in the coming weeks, and it's customary for the panel to give at least 2 weeks' notice. So I'm sure that council will, when we find out those details, we'll get that across and make sure that people are aware that, you know, they can have that input.
I'll just follow up on that, and I might ask Ms. Assistant General Manager, Relieving General Manager, to could you just explain for the councillors and the gallery the pathway of the DA process from here on, and what could be with the public access, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So council has submitted the report from the independent consultant to the panel. The panel now will set a meeting, a determination meeting date. We're yet to actually find out what that date is, but as this report alludes to, we're expecting it in the coming weeks to be confirmed. Some occasions the panel decides, and it's up to them, to do what they do as a public hearing, where they have a public access session separate to a determination meeting, or they might roll both the sort of the public access and the determination meeting into one. That's something for the panel, and certainly when we actually get confirmation on what their process will be, we will make sure that we clearly articulate that. So once it goes to the panel, they will either determine the outcome, be it approval or refusal. And then it's a matter of where, you know, what proceeds thereafter. So we're expecting that the panel will make that decision, and as this report also alludes to, is the panel will notify everyone who made a submission and notify them directly of the hearing determination date and give those people an opportunity to speak. Very similar process to council's public access. So I presume, depending on the numbers, they might have a standalone meeting for sort of the public access if they get large numbers, or they might roll them into one. So we'll have to just wait and see.
Thank you. And look, I'd encourage those who are in support or against this residential subdivision to address the Northern Regional Planning Panel when that opportunity arises. I think that's the important thing to do. They will be assessing, as has been said a few times, and it's there from our independent to be refusal. But I think those people who are very concerned about on both sides of the item, that they really take this advantage to go and make their feelings felt. Is there any other speakers? Other items? Matters for information? Okay, I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, I now need to a recommendation to go into closed committee. Oh, sorry, item 20. Questions on notice, there's nil. 21, is there any questions for the next meeting in writing? Councillor Hayes.
Nearly forgot about them. I'll read them out. This is the New South Wales Government's announcement to provide rate assistance for those residents impacted by flood has come as a welcome relief for those doing it tough. I've just a couple of questions based around that. It says, does the relief expire when a property is sold? Okay. In a commercial lease situation, the tenant is usually responsible for all outgoings, including the rates, the land rates. Does the rate relief remain with the property owner if the current lease expires or is terminated? I don't know where we find the answers to that, but no.
We'll get that at the next meeting. Any other questions for the next meeting in writing? No? Councillors, I need a motion to go into close.
Moved.
Councillor Morrissey. Seconder. Councillor Humphreys. Acting General Manager, has there been any written representation made regarding the meeting going into closed council?
None received, Mr Mayor.
Are there any verbal representations from the members of the gallery? Nope, there is no gallery. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? carried. Mrs. Acting General Manager, could you read or arrange for someone to read the recommendations, please?
Director Zeller will read the recommendations, given they're his reports.
In the item 22.1, tender VP 308256, design and construct amenities block at Casino Showgrounds. Recommendation that Council 1 declines the submissions received for tender VP 308256, design and construct amenities block at Casino Showgrounds, due to the prices submitted being higher than the budget allocated for the works. 2, applies clause 1783E of the Local Government General Regulation 2021 to authorise the General Manager to enter into direct negotiations with suitably qualified contractors with a view to obtaining works that provide Council with the best outcome both from a financial and delivery perspective, and to finalise the terms of the contract or agreement and affixing the seal of Council where necessary. And 3, notes that the outcomes of the negotiations will be reported to Council for information at a future meeting. In the item 22.2, tender VP 284690, Namoona Waste and Resource Recovery Facility Cell 6A construction, recommend that 1, Council accepts the tender from Synergy Resource Management, which represents the best value for Council at $2,642,737 exclusive of GST, for the construction of a new waste cell at the Namoona Waste and Resource Recovery Facility, and 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contractor agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of Council where necessary.
Thank you. Wish everyone a safe trip home, and thank you for your attendance, and thank you, Ms. Acting General Manager, for sitting in the hot seat tonight. Closes the meeting. Thank you.